Test.
breathing, standing up, everybody's gonna see it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. Even if we fall, we will rise up and we follow the path that we believe in. No, we're not gonna stop until we reach it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. We rise up from the dust and
Test.
claim our throne. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne. We all have our reasons why we are on this track. Oh, we all have our burdens, yeah.
Hello.
We just keep on fighting and we never look back.
Hello.
Here we go, 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 let us heal and grow. You won't be alone, we're unstoppable. Don't be afraid to show what we're going for. This is what we know. Here we come back to life, we're still breathing. Standing up, everybody's gonna see it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. Even if we fall, we will rise up and we follow the path that we believe in. No, we're not gonna stop until we reach it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne.
Okay, is my audio working? It seems to be. All right. Let's get on with another reading in Trust Me, I'm Lying. And, yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure you guys can hear me. So, okay. So we're on to Chapter 15. Slacktivism is not activism. Resisting the time and mind suck of online media. And our quote is, "There is no more big lie, only big lulls. And getting gamed is no shame. It's the seal on the social contract, a mark of our participation in this new covenant of cousining." And that's from Wired. You sit down to your computer to work. 5 minutes later, you're on your fifth YouTube video of talking babies. What happened? Do you just not have any self-control? Sorry, but self-control has got nothing to do with it. Not when the clip was deliberately made more attractive by subliminally embedded images guaranteed to catch your attention. Not when the length of the video is calibrated to be precisely as long as average viewers are statistically most likely to watch. Not when autoplay starts the next video before you have time to click away. Would you also be surprised to hear that the content of the video was designed around popular search terms, and that the title went through multiple iterations to see what got the most clicks? And what if the video you watched after this one, and the one after that, and after that, had been recommended and optimized by YouTube with the deliberate intention of making online video take up as much time in your life as television does? No wonder you can't get any work done. They won't let you. The key, as megawatt liberal blogger Matt Iglesias advised when interviewed for the book Making It in the Political Blogosphere, is to keep readers addicted. Quote, the idea is to discourage people from drifting away. If you give them a break, they might find that there's something else that's just as good, and they might go away. End quote. We once naively believed that blogs would be a boon to democracy. Unlike TV, the web wasn't about passive consumption. Blogs were about engagement and citizen activism. Blogs looked like they would free us from a crummy media world of bias, conflict, manipulation, and sensationalism. But as James Fenimore Cooper pres- uh, presciently observed in the 19th century, quote, if newspapers are useful in overthrowing tyrants, it is only to establish a tyranny of their own, end quote. Tyranny is an understatement for the media today. Those between the ages of 8 and 18 are online roughly 8 hours a day, a figure that does not include texting or television. America spends more than 50 billion minutes a day on Facebook, and nearly a quarter of all internet browsing time is spent on social media sites and blogs. In a given month, blogs stream something like 150 million videos to their users. So, of course, there is mass submission and apathy. Everyone is distracted, deliberately so. The idea that the web is empowering is just a bunch of rattling, chattering talk. Everything you consume online has been optimized to make you dependent on it. Content is engineered to be clicked, glanced at, or found, like a trap designed to bait, distract, and capture you. Blogs are about to game you, to steal your time, are out to game you, sorry, to steal your time from you and sell it to advertisers. And they do this every day. Cheating is everything. You see a link to a video in a YouTube search that makes it look like a hot girl is in it, so you click. You watch, but she's nowhere to be found. Welcome to the art of thumbnail cheating, clickbait. It's a common tactic YouTube publishers use to make their videos more tantalizing than the competition. Or they'll put the girl at the very last second of the video so you get just that, you get the thumbnail, essentially. Not that I have ever fallen for clickbait. The most common play is to use a girl, preferably one who looks like she might get naked, but it can be anything from a kitten to a photo of someone famous. Anything to give the clip an edge. Some of the biggest accounts on YouTube were built this way. The technique can drive thousands or even tens of thousands of views to a video, helping it chart on most viewed lists and allowing it to spread and be recommended. In fact, I got caught by clickbait tonight before I started the stream. I watched a video on 27 actors from the Harry Potter movies that have died, and in the thumbnail they had Bonnie Wright, implying that she had died. And I was like, what? What is this? Bonnie Wright played um, Ginny Weasley, if you don't know the name. Anyway, moving on. Online video publishers do this with YouTube's consent. Originally, YouTube chose a video thumbnail from the halfway, 1/4, or 3/4 point of the video. So smart manipulators simply inserted a single frame of a sexy image at exactly one of those points in order to draw clicks. Members of the YouTube Partner Program, the people who get paid for their contributions to YouTube through ad revenue and make millions for the company, are allowed to use any image they choose as their thumbnail, even images that don't ever appear in the video. Sure, YouTube asks that the image be representative, but if they are actually serious about quashing profitable trickery, why allow the practice at all? I think he's talking about an old practice because I am not any kind of partner with YouTube, and I put thumbnails at the beginning of all of my videos, whatever I choose. Because this is an endless battle for clicks and attention, everyone is trying to get an edge. Fake news. I was speaking with my father the other day, and he asked me a question about some news he'd read. What he said was confusing and didn't quite add up, so I looked online and found it. Oops, the story was from The Onion. It was satire, shared on Facebook and glanced at only for its headline, though it seemed real. No wonder people voted a notorious liar into office. They've gotten used to being lied to. I assume he's talking about Trump because they would never dare call Biden a liar. Oh my God, he was just the be all end all. I mean, Jesus 3.0, because Obama was Jesus 2.0. Anyway, enough of my politics. The Onion isn't the only one who exploits this phenomenon, of course. Andy Borowitz, the left wing satirist, knows that a huge portion of his traffic comes from unthinking clicks by people who confuse satire with real headlines, and the New Yorker who publishes him benefits from that confusion. More recently, we've seen a rise in publications that specialize in almost outright propaganda, actual fake news. Sites like Denver Guardian, InfoWars, National Report, 70 News, The Political Insider, and Ending the Fed. InfoWars, really? The guy that's right like 90% of the time? Okay. Headlines like FBI agents suspected in Hillary email leaks found dead in apparent murder suicide. WikiLeaks confirms Hillary sold weapons to ISIS, then drops another bombshell. Breaking: Fox News exposes traitor Megyn Kelly, kicks her out for backing Hillary. These are not real publications, and the claims in those headlines are not true, but that's precisely the point. They feel true. People share and spread them for the same reasons that deep down motivate you to share most of the articles you share on Facebook or Twitter, as Ricky Van Veen pointed out in his excellent TED Talk. They confirm what you want to be true and what you want to reflect your identity. Even when the sites are reputable, the content might not be. Even reputable outlets seem to be unable to resist the urge to traffic in fake news. For instance, I'm no fan of Ben Carson. When I saw his USA Today headline, I just shook my head. Ben Carson just referred to slaves as immigrants. What an asshole, right? The New York Times headline is not much better. Ben Carson refers to slaves as immigrants in first remarks to HUD staff. If the Times and USA Today say it, it's got to be true. But it was because I had this immediately negative reaction to Ben Carson, because it seemed almost too boneheaded even for him, that I urged myself to check the article out. Turns out, after speaking about immigrants coming to America via Ellis Island, Carson had said, quote, "There were other immigrants who came here in the bottom of slave ships, worked even longer, even harder for less, but they too had a dream that one day their sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters, great grandsons, great granddaughters might pursue prosperity and happiness in this land." End quote. Only someone trying to deliberately wrench those remarks out of context would think Carson, who is black by the way, was referring to slaves as willing immigrants. He clearly said they came here in slave ships and was making a point most people who agree with his policies would agree with, that African Americans have had to work even harder than immigrants to fulfill even the most basic dreams for their children. Yet all of that was lost because somebody wanted to get more traffic for their article. I still don't like Ben Carson, but I dislike him for real reasons, not because of fake news. I cannot stress enough how important this distinction is. The more an article feels like it's true, the more skeptical you should be about it. If you haven't heard of the website before, it's probably because it's not legitimate. Be discerning, be cynical. Don't let close enough be your standard for truth and opinion. Insist on accuracy and on getting it right. Okay. He needs to follow his own advice there a little bit, I think. Selling you to the highest bidder. Ever notice those little for our partners or from around the web thumbnails and links that appear on the pages of basically every major online publisher these days, from the Huffington Post to CNN.com to Slate? If you didn't know, those sites aren't really partners. These links are not hand-picked stories that the site's editors thought worthy of referral. Would anyone ever willingly link to an article from Allstate Insurance? No, these links are part of an ad unit. The biggest providers in this space are companies like Taboola and Outbrain. The point is to trick users interested in more content into clicking on scammy ads loosely disguised as content. Quote, people struggling with credit card debt may be in for a big surprise, end quote. Quote, my wife and I tried Blue Apron. Here's what happened, end quote. Quote, 10 celebs who lost their hot bodies, end quote. Even as I write this, the New York Times is running their own version of one of these ads at the top of their site. Quote, why Irish pubs are a metaphor for American immigration, end quote. Sponsored by Guinness. It's probably not a coincidence that a good many of these links have bikini photo thumbnails, weight loss success stories, or celebrity names in the headline. Sites get paid by the click and users can't unclick. So tactics that encourage the action are all that matter at the end of the day. More important, great content publishers are far less likely to need to buy traffic than crappy publishers or scammy salespeople. It's just people selling credit cards and mindless gossip at high margins need to chase the idiots who click those things. It's a rough sentence. If that feels a little gross, it should. When you're on fusion.net, thinking they care about you, in fact, they've done the calculation and found that it's more profitable to send you away to another site than it is to keep you there reading more of the original content they make themselves. Of course, not every site makes this bargain. I asked Patrick DeLave, co-founder of thenextweb.com, why from our partners links were conspicuously absent from his site. His reply, quote, the main reason why we're not doing something like that is that we don't see the value for our readers. It might be an okay revenue stream, but as long as there is no clear value to our readers, we don't want to bother them with it, end quote. But the reality is most sites do. Drugged and delusional, the result. I remember seeing Jeff Jarvis, the blogger best known for his condescending media pontificating at a tech conference once. He sat down next to me ostensibly to watch and listen to the talk. Not once did he look up from his laptop. He tapped away the entire time, first on Twitter, then on Facebook, then moderating comments on his blog, and on, completely oblivious to the world. It struck me then that whatever I decided to do with the rest of my life, I did not want to end up like him, because at the end of the talk, Jarvis got up and spoke during the panel's Q&A, addressing the speakers as well as the audience. In the world of the web, why should not paying attention preclude you from getting your say? Kind of out of context, but my found some secrets about the pentagram. I'm curious, what is your take when you have the time? Uh, that's a not a simple question to answer right off the top of my head. So, uh, I will have to think about that one, and maybe I'm not sure how I'll answer. We'll figure it out. Okay. Um, where was I? That's what web culture does to you. Psychologists call this the narcotizing dysfunction. When people come to mistake the busyness of the media with real knowledge and cons- confuse spending time consuming what? And confuse spending time consuming that with what? I don't understand this sentence. What is he trying to say here? When people come to mistake the busyness of the media with real knowledge and confuse spending time consuming that with doing something. That doesn't make any sense. In 1948, long before the louder, faster, and busier world of Twitter, the social media, Paul Lazarsfeld and Robert Merton wrote, quote, "The interested and informed citizen can congratulate himself on his lofty state of interest and information and neglect to see from he has abstained from decision and action. In short, he takes his secondary contact with the world of political reality, his reading and listening and thinking as a vicarious performance. He is concerned, he is informed, and he has all sorts of ideas as to what should be done, but after he has gotten through his dinner, and after he has listened to his favored radio programs, and after he has read his second newspaper of the day, it is really time for bed." End quote. Went deep into geometry to find the pentagram, but it does appear naturally in geometry. Okay. This is the exact reaction that our current online system produces: apathy without self awareness. To keep you so caught up and consumed with the bubble that you don't even realize you're in one. The more time kids spend online, studies show, the worse their grades are. According to a Nielsen study, active social networks are 26% more likely to give their opinion on politics and current events online, even though they are exactly the people whose opinions should matter the least. Quote, "Talkativeness is afraid of the silence which reveals its emptiness," end quote. Kierkegaard once said. Now you know why sharing, commenting, clicking, and participating are pushed so strongly by blogs and entertainment sites. They don't want silence. No wonder blogs auto-refresh with new material every 30 seconds. Of course they want to send updates to your phone and include you on email alerts. No one is listening to you. They're laughing at you. They're glad you're distracted. They're happy you're posting on social media because it means you're not showing up at city council meetings, because it means you're not voting. It's time that both sides face up to the incredible manipulation that's happening to both parties. By that I mean people, not political parties. Twitter isn't designed to help you get in and get out with the most information as quickly as possible. It's supposed to suck you into either a contentious world of argument and debate or an echo chamber that reassures you everyone thinks like you do. Facebook is supposedly one of the largest news sources in the world, and days after the election, it denied that the news it shared could have possibly impacted users' behavior in a significant way. With manipulative tactics that range from exploiting the so-called attention gap to giving voice to propagandistic campaign surrogates to addictive UX features to editors warping coverage around their own narrative, we're all drowning in the sea of unreality. If the users stop for even a second, they may see what is really going on, and then the business model would fall apart. Okay. How to make America great again. My son was born on November 9th, 2016. The surprise of the election results had sent my wife into labor. The previous few months had been particularly unhappy ones for me, not because there was anything wrong in my life. On the contrary, in my life things were going quite well. The source of my misery? I was caught up in the news cycle. I told myself it was partly my job, but the reality was I was doing less of my job. How could it have been otherwise? I'd become consumed by a divisive, contentious, scandal driven news loop. Twitter, Google News, Apple News, Facebook, long reads, and hot takes via Instapaper, CNN, email conversations, NPR. My media diet had gone from abstemious to addicted. As we sat in the recovery room and I caught myself pulling up my Twitter account to read another article from another person who had undoubtedly been wrong about the election, as I myself embarrassingly had, I felt a wave of shame. What the hell was I doing? Here in the hospital, in this important moment in my life, I was trying to read the news. I'd venture to guess that there is someone else who, deep down, can at least relate to that sentiment. Fellow and admitted news junkie and now President Donald Trump. It's time we all came to terms with our compulsion. How is anyone going to make America or themselves great again if we're all glued to our devices and television screens? How can anyone maintain their sanity when everything you read, see, and hear is designed to make you stop whatever you're doing and consume because the world is supposedly ending? To think of it in his morning viewing of Fox and Friends, his evening tune in to Hannity, and his regular checking of silly conspiracy ridden Twitter accounts that have been responsible for some of his administration's most boneheaded and unnecessary scandals. In the 1990s, political scientists began to speak about what they called the CNN effect. The basic premise was that a world of 24-hour media coverage would have considerable impact on foreign and domestic policy. When world leaders, generals, and politicians watched their actions and the actions of their counterparts dissected, analyzed, and speculated about in real time, it change it changes what they do and how they do it, much for the worse. When they came up with this theory, CNN was most likely a niche channel. The idea that it would soon be only a part of a vast, attention sucking ecosystem that went far beyond broadcasting 24 hours a day was inconceivable. Today, the news machine includes not only dozens of cable channels, but also millions of blogs and hundreds of millions of social media accounts, all of which operate in real time, creating billions of bits of content a second. How can anyone make rough decisions while trying to keep abreast of this? How do you know what is real chatter and what is fake? The answer is they can't. They just get whipped around and are as confused as everything else. I marked the day after the election by doing the following. I deleted Twitter from my phone. I deleted Facebook from my phone. I deleted the Google News app from my phone. I figured out how to remove Apple News from Siri. I removed CNN from my nightly scan of the television channels. I wasn't interested in being jerked around anymore. I didn't need to follow every meaningless update or fall for every outrageous headline. It was preventing me from seeing the bigger pictures. Now, if only politicians and leaders could do the same, the world would be a better place. And that is the end of that chapter. Um, take those glasses off for a second here. We'll read one more chapter tonight. Stay on our two chapter a night schedule. Um, I've already looked ahead. This chapter is going to be another 12, 13 pages. So if you can stand to listen to me blather on reading from this book and stumbling over the words for 13 more pages, then I commend you. All right, so chapter 16. Just passing this along when no one owns what they say. And we have two quotes this time. Our readers collectively know far more than we will even ever know, and by responding to our posts, they quickly make our coverage more nuanced and accurate. And that's by Henry Blodgett, editor and CEO of Business Insider. And then the second one is truths are more likely to have been discovered by one man than by a nation. That is by Descartes. Okay. Henry Blodgett, in a revealing on-stage interview with reporter Andrew Sorkin, explained the increasingly common cycle like this, quote, there are stories that will appear on Gawker Media, huge conversations in the blogosphere, everything else. It's passed all over. Everyone knows about it. Everybody's clicking on it. Then finally, an approved source speaks to the New York Times on or somebody else, and the New York Times will suddenly say, quote, okay, now we can report that, end quote. On Twitter, you'll see a common phrase in people's bios. Retweets don't equal endorsements. Meaning that just because they share something doesn't mean they agree with it or know if it's true or not. The venture capitalist Mark Andreessen often jokingly tweets alongside breaking news, quote, huge if true, end quote. In reality, news is meaningless unless true. In White House press briefings and now from politicians themselves, we see a version of this attitude. Statements are prefaced with, quote, it's being reported that, or presented as alternative facts, end quote. Errors are being defended with lots of people were saying it, quote unquote. Just imagine you're the guy whose job it is to apologize to the British ambassador because the president stupidly accused British spies of helping Barack Obama wiretap him. Just imagine actually having to say, as a White House office official later told reporters, Mr. Spicer and General McMaster both explained that Trump was simply pointing to public reports and not endorsing any specific story, quote unquote. I almost pitied Sean Spicer. Quote, all we're doing is literally reading off what other stations and people have reported. We're not casting judgment on that, end quote. Apparently, we live in a world where at even the highest and most sensitive level, information is passed on without being vetted, where the final judgment of truth or falsity does not fall on the outlet reporting it or the person spreading it, but on the readers themselves. As a TechCrunch editor described it, quote, the social media I'm stumbling a lot tonight. Quote, with social media, there are no editors. There is no waiting for confirmation. When you tweet or retweet, you're not checking the facts or even so much concerned if you are spreading a lie. But this is how process journalism now works. It's journalism as beta, end quote. Is it any wonder, then, that we are drowning in inaccuracies and mistakes? I don't think so. Nearly everyone involved in media and politics is shirking their duty, and that makes them ripe for exploitation, or in the case of American Apparel and CNN, a missile that can strike your company at any time. And yet, most of the social media elite want this for our future. The delegation of trust. Reporters can hardly be everywhere at once. For most of recent history, media outlets all used the same self-imposed editorial guidelines, so relying on one another's work was natural. When a fact appeared in the Chicago Tribune, it was pretty safe for the San Francisco Chronicle to repeat that same fact, since both publications have high verification standards. These were the old rules. 1. If the outlet is legitimate, the stories it breaks are. 2. If the story is legitimate, the facts inside it are. 3. It can be assumed that if the subject of the story is legitimate, then what people are saying about it is probably is too. Okay. These rules allow one journalist to use the facts brought forth by another, hopefully with attribution. This assumption makes researching much easier for reporters since they can build on the work of those who came before them instead of starting from the beginning of a story. It's a process known as the delegation of trust. The web has its own innovation on the delegation of trust known as link economy. Basically, it refers to the exchange of traffic and information between blogs and websites. Say the Los Angeles Times reported that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie were splitting up. Perez Hilton would link to this report on his blog. Perez Hilton, I guess, I don't know, and add his own thoughts. Then other blogs would link to Perez's account and maybe the original Times source as well. This is an outgrowth from the early days of blogging when blogs lacked the resources to do much original reporting. They relied on other outlets to break stories, which they then linked to and provided commentary on. From this came what is called the link economy, one that encourages sites to regularly and consistently link to each other. I send you a link now, you send me a link later. We trade off doing the job of reporting. The phrase link economy was popularized by Jeff Jarvis, whom you met here earlier. His credentials as a blogger, journalism professor at the City University of New York's Graduate School of Journalism, and author of books such as What Would Google Do, made him an early influential voice in new media. Unfortunately, he's also an idiot, and the link economy concept he advocated has unquestionably made the media a less reliable source than it once was. The link economy encourages blogs to point their readers to other bloggers who are saying crazy things, to borrow from each other without verification, and to make more or less completed stories from other sites, add a layer of commentary, and turn them into something they call their own. To borrow a term from computer science, the link economy is recursive. Blogs pull from the blogs that came before them to create new content. Think of how a mashup video relies on other clips to make something new, or how Twitter users retweet messages from other members and add to them. But as the trading up the chain scam makes clear, the media is no longer governed by a set of universal editorial and ethics standards. Even within publications, the burden of proof for the print version of the newspaper might differ drastically from what reporters need to go live with a blog post. As media outlets grapple with tighter deadlines and smaller staffs, many of the old standards for verification, confirmation, and fact checking are becoming impossible to maintain. Every blog has its own editorial policy, but few disclose it to the readers. The materials one site pulls from another can hardly be trusted when it's just as likely to have been written with low standards as with high ones. The conditions on which the delegation of trust and the link economy need to operate properly no longer exist, but the habits remain and have been mixed into a potent combination. The result is often embarrassing and contagious misinformation. A few years back, a young Irish student posted a fake quotation on the Wikipedia page of composer Maurice Jarre, I'm not sure, Jarre, shortly after the man died. The obituary friendly quote said, in part, quote, "When I die, there will be a final waltz playing in my head that only I can hear," end quote. At the time, I'm not sure the student understood the convergence of the link economy and the delegation of trust. That changed in an instant when his fabricated quote began to appear in obituaries for the composer around the world. It's difficult to pinpoint where it started, but at some point a reporter or a blogger saw that quotation and used it in an article. Eventually, the quote found its way to The Guardian, and from there it may as well have been real. The quote so perfectly expressed what writers wished to say about Jarre, and the fact that it was in The Guardian, a reputable and prominent newspaper, made it the source of many links. And so it went along the chain, its origins obscured, and the more times it was repeated, the more real it felt. This is where the link economy fails in practice. Wikipedia editors may have caught and quickly removed the student's edit, but that didn't automatically update the obituaries that had incorporated it. Wikipedia administrators are not able to edit stories on other people's websites, so the quote remained in The Guardian until they caught and corrected it too. The link economy is designed to confirm and support, not to question or correct. In fact, the stunt was only discovered after the student admitted what he'd done. Quote, I am 100% convinced that if I hadn't come forward, that quote would have gone down in history as something Maurice Jarre said instead of something I made up, he said. It would have become another example where once anything is printed enough times in the media without challenge, it becomes fact. End quote. The proponents of the link economy brush aside these examples. The posts can be updated. They say that's the beauty of the internet. But as far as I know, there is no technology that issues alerts to each trackback or every reader who has read a corrupted article, and there never will be. Senator Eugene McCarthy once compared the journalists covering his 1968 presidential campaign to birds on a telephone wire. When one got up to fly to a different wire, they'd all follow. When one flew back, the rest would too. Today, this metaphor needs an update. The birds still follow one another's leads just as eagerly, but the wire needs not always exist. They can be and often are perched on illusions, such as blogs, where just as blogs were when they repeated Maurice Jarre's manufactured remarks. What do we got left here? Oof, we got a ways. Holy shit. Yeah, not very far into this chapter. The link illusion. In the link economy, the blue stamp of an HTML link seems like it will support weight, as had the links to the Guardian story containing the false quote. If I write in an article that, quote, Thomas Jefferson, by his own remarks, admitted to committing acts considered felonious in the state of Virginia, end quote, you'd want to see some evidence before you were convinced. Now imagine that I added a link to the words acts considered felonious, quote unquote. This link could go to anything. It could go to a dictionary definition of felonious acts, or it could go to a PDF of the entire penal code for the state of Virginia, or it could just go to a GIF that when you click it says, ha, you shouldn't have trusted me. But by linking to something, I have vaguely complied with the standards of the link economy. I have rested my authority on a source and linked to it, and now the burden is on the reader to disprove the validity of that link. Bloggers know this and abuse it. Blogs have long traded on the principle that links imply credibility. Even Google exploits this perception. The search engine, founded by Larry Page and Sergey Brin when they were Stanford students, copies a standard practice from academia in which the number of citations a scientific paper gets is an indicator of how influential or important it is. But academic papers are reviewed by peers and editorial boards. Shaky citations are hard to get away with. Online links look like citations but rarely are. Through flimsy attributions, blogs are able to assert wildly fantastic claims that will spread well and drive comments. Some might be afraid to make something up outright, so the justification of I wasn't the first person to say this is very appealing. It's a way of putting the burden all on the other guy or on the reader. People consume content online by scanning and skimming. To use the bird metaphor again, they are what William Zinsser called impatient birds, perched on the thin edge of distraction. Only 44% of users on Google News click through to read the actual article, meaning nobody clicks links, even interesting ones. Or if they do, they're not exactly rigorous in poring over the article to make sure it proves the point in the last article they read. There are a great there was a great April Fool's prank a few years ago where NPR created an article headlined, "Why Doesn't America Read Anymore?" The article looked like it would be a complaint about the decline in reading and critical thinking skills, and so it immediately went viral, shared on Facebook thousands of times, except if you actually clicked the article, you'd find that what it actually said was, quote, "We sometimes get the sense that some people are commenting on NPR stories that they haven't actually read. If you're reading this, please like this post and do not comment on it. Then let's see what people have to say about this story." End quote. Countless people fell for that because they don't actually click links. They just assume they know what's behind them, and often they assume the links confirm whatever they want them to confirm. If readers give sites just seconds for their headlines, how much effort will they expend weighing whether a blog post meets the burden of proof? The number of posts we read conscientiously, like some amateur copy editor and fact checker rolled into one, are far outpaced by the number of articles we just assume are reliable. And the material from one site quickly makes its way to others. Scandalous statements get traction wider and faster, and their dubious nature is more likely to be obscured by the link economy when it's moving at viral speed. Who knows how many times you and I have passed over spurious assertions made to look legitimate through a bright little link. The breaking news excuse. One of the ways that journalists justify their laziness today is by claiming that breaking news deserves special exemptions from their normal obligations to, actually be right and pass along correct information. That that during a mass shooting, a fast-moving election night, some unexpected controversy, there isn't time to do real reporting, and so it's better to just pass along the information they have to readers and viewers as it comes in. There are a lot of words they use to describe this technique: iterative journalism, process journalism, beta journalism. Whatever name you use, it's stupid and dangerous. It calls for bloggers to publish first and then verify what they wrote after they've posted it. Publishers actually believe that their writers need to do every part of the newsmaking process, from discovery to fact checking to writing and editing, in real time. It should be obvious to anyone who thinks about it for 2 seconds why this is a bad thing, but they buy the lie that iterative journalism improves the news. Eric Wemple, a blogger for the Washington Post, writes, quote, "The imperative is to to pounce on news when it happens, and in this case, before it happens. To wait for another source is to set the table for someone who's going to steal your search traffic," end quote. So by the time I've woken up in the morning, too much misinformation has been spread around the web to possibly be cleaned up. The, quote, "incentives are lined up this way," end quote. Tommy Craggs would say while he was at Deadspin, and we just needed to get used to it. Seeking Alpha practiced it perfectly on one recent story. Quote, "If the newspaper is correct and I have no way of verifying it, then this stock is in big trouble." End quote. Really? Can't verify it? No way at all? At its best, iterative journalism is what TechCrunch does. Rile up the crowd by repeating sensational allegations and then pretend that they are waiting for the facts to come in. They see no absurdity in publishing a post with the headline, "PayPal shreds ostensibly rare violin because it cares," and then opening the article with, quote, "Now a lot of this story isn't out yet, and I have a line in to PayPal about this, so before we get out the pitchforks, let's discuss what happened," end quote. These chapters seem longer for some reason. They're like the chapters that will never end. I don't know why. Um, Arthur Schopenhauer called newspapers, quote, "the second hand of history." end quote, but added that the hand was made of inferior metal and rarely working properly. He said that journalists were like little dogs. Something moves and they start barking. The problem is that what they're often barking at is, quote, no more than a shadow play on the fall, end quote. Iterative journalists, whether writing for a newspaper a few centuries ago or a blog today, follow blindly wherever the wisps of the speculation may take them. So the absolute minimum amount of research or corroboration, and then post this suspect information immediately as it is known in a continuous stream. As Jeff Jarvis put it, quote, online we often publish first and edit later. Newspaper people see this article as finished products, their article as finished products of their work. Bloggers see their posts as part of the process of learning, period, end quote. Or as Gawker's former media reporter said, quote, Gawker believes that publicly airing rumors out is usually the quickest way to get to the truth. Let's acknowledge that we can't vouch for the veracity or truth of the rumors we'll be sharing here, but maybe you can. End quote. Jesus Christ. This learning process is not some, I know the word, I'm just struggling with pronunciation here, sorry, epistemological quest. Dropping the ruse, Michael Arrington, founder of TechCrunch, put it more bluntly, quote, getting it right is expensive, getting it first is cheap, end quote. And by extension, since it doesn't cost him anything to be wrong, he presumably doesn't bother trying to avoid it. It's not just less costly, it makes more money, because every time the blog has to correct itself, it gets another post out of it, more page views. The iterative approach sells itself as flexible and informative, but much more realistically, it manifests in the forms of rumors, half-truths, shoddy reporting, overwhelming amounts of needless information, and endless predictions and projections. Instead of using slow to respond official sources or documents, it leans on rumors, buzz, and questions. Events are live blogged instead of filtered. Bloggers post constantly, but depending on others to point out errors or send in updates, or for sources to contact them. Iterative journalism is defined by its jumpiness. It is as jumpy as reporters can get without outright making things up. Only the slightest twitch is needed for a journalist to get a story live. As a result, stories claiming massive implications like takeover talks, lawsuits, potential legislation, pending announcements, and criminal allegations are often posted despite having minuscule origins. A tweet, a comment on a blog, or an email tip might be enough to do the trick. Bloggers don't fabricate news, but they do suspend their disbelief, common sense, and responsibility in order to get up to big stories first. The pressure to get something up is inherently at odds with the desire to get things right. A blog practicing iterative journalism would report that they are hearing that Google is planning to buy Twitter or Yelp, or break the news of reports that the president has been assassinated, all falsely reported online many times now. The blog would publish the story as it investigates these facts. That is, publish the rumor first while they see if there is anything more to the story. Hypothetically, a media manipulator for Yelp would be behind the leak, knowing that getting the rumors of the acquisition out there would help them jack up the price in negotiations. I personally wouldn't kick off reports about the president's death because I wouldn't get anything from it, but plenty of pranksters would. If a blog is lucky, the gamble it took on a sketchy iterative tip will be confirmed later by events. If it is unlucky, and this is the real insidious part, the site simply continues to report on the reaction to the news as though they had nothing to do with creating it. This is what happened to Business Insider when they wrongly made the shocking claim that New York Governor David Paterson would resign. The end of the headline was simply updated. New York, quote, New York Times big David Patterson bombshell will break Monday. Governor's resignation to follow, end quote, became, quote, New York Times big David Patterson bombshell will break Monday. Governor's office denies resignation in works, end quote. They should have learned their lesson months earlier after falling for a similar hoax. A prankster posted on CNN's online iReport platform that a source, quote unquote, had told them that Steve Jobs had had a severe heart attack. It was the user's first and only post. It was posted at 4 a.m. It was obviously a hoax. Even the site McRumors.com, which writes about nothing but rumors, knew this post was bogus and didn't write about it. Nonetheless, following its iterative instincts, Business Insider's sister blog, Silicon Alley Insider, rushed to advance the story as a full-fledged post. Apple's stock price plummeted. 25 minutes later, the story in tatters, the fake tip deleted by iReport, the rumor denied by Apple. Business Insider rewrote the lead with a new angle. Quote, Citizen journalism just failed its first significant test. End quote. Yeah, that's who failed here. You know who didn't? Those who were shorting Apple stock. And what are the consequences for blowing it this poorly? There are none. All that can happen, the famous and reckless gossip columnist Walter Winchell once said about one of his breaking scoops, quote, if it is wrong, is that I goofed again. So the first part was all that can happen. Um, sorry. But hey, at least he was willing to own even that. Today, as a way of avoiding ever being embarrassingly off base, blogs couch their claims in qualifiers. Quote, we're hearing, end quote. Quote, I wonder, end quote. Possibly, quote unquote. Lots of buzz that. Chatter indicates that. Sites are reporting. Might, maybe, could, would, should. All those are short quotes, short separate quotes. And so on. In other words, they toss the news narrative into the stream without taking full ownership and pretend to be an impartial observer of a process they began. For example, these are the first two sentences of New York Magazine's Daily Intel blog post about David Patterson, the former governor of New York. Quote, after weeks of escalating buzz about a New York Times piece that would reveal a bombshell scandal about New York Governor David Patterson, Business Insider is reporting that the story will likely come out tomorrow and will be followed by the governor's resignation. End quote. Oh, nope, not end quote. Sorry. It continues. Though the nature of the revelation is still a mystery, reports are that this story is much worse than Patterson's publicly acknowledged affair with a state employee. End quote. Whew. We're almost there. 3 pages total. Welcome to Covering Your Ass 101. Nearly every claim is tempered by what might happen or attributed to someone else. Nearly every claim attributed to someone else links to some other site. But what does the writer actually think? What are they willing to own based on their personal reporting and knowledge? Not much. They want to say all they can and nothing at the same time. The height of disingenuous hedging, which worked out great for Daily Intel, since the story turned out to be totally wrong. Not that anyone learned from the mistake. The posts were just updated with more speculation and guessing. One mistake is replaced by more mistakes. Quote, there is nothing more shocking than to see assertion and approval dashing ahead of cognition and perception, Cicero said a long time ago, or maybe I just made it up. Are you going to check? But that's how it works online, on purpose. As they say, it's not a bug, it's a feature. A broken philosophy. May becomes is becomes has, I tell my clients. That is, on the first sight, the fact that you may be doing something becomes the fact that you are doing something by the time it has made the rounds. The next time they mention your name, they look back and add the past tense to their last assertion, whether or not it actually happened. This is recursion at work, officially sanctioned and very possible under the rules of the link economy. Under these circumstances, it is far too easy for mistakes to pile on top of mistakes, or for real reporting to be built on lies and manipulations, for analysis to be built on a foundation of weak support. It becomes so easy, as one reporter has put it, for things to become an amalgam of an amalgam. The link economy encourages bloggers to repeat what other people are saying, quote unquote, and link to it instead of doing their own reporting and standing behind it. This changes the news from what has happened into what someone said the news is. Needless to say, these are not close to the same thing. One of my favorite books is Catherine Schultz's Being Wrong: Adventures in the Margin of Error. Though media mistakes are not the subject of the book, Schultz does do a good job of explaining why the media so regularly gets it wrong. Scientists, she says, replicate each other's experiments in order to prove or disprove their findings. Conversely, journalists replicate one another's conclusions and build on them, often when they are not correct. The news has always been riddled with errors because it is self-referential instead of self-critical. Mistakes don't occur as isolated incidents, but ripple through the news, sometimes with painful consequences, because blogs and the media have become so interdependent and linked. A lapse of judgment or poor analysis in one place affects many places. Science essentially pits the scientists against each other, each looking to disprove the works of others. This process strips out falsehoods, mistakes, and errors. Journalism has no such culture. Reporters look to one another. Uh, Reporters look to one up each other on the same subjects, often adding new scoops to existing stories. Meanwhile, people like Jeff Jarvis explicitly advise online newspapers and aspiring blogs not to waste their time trying, quote, to replicate the work of other reporters, end quote. In the age of the link, he says, quote, this is clearly inefficient and unnecessary, end quote. Don't waste now precious resources matching competitors' stories, or checking and verifying them like a scientist would. Instead, pick up where they left off and see where the story takes you. Don't be a perfectionist, he's saying. Join the link economy and delegate trust. When I hear people preach about interconnectedness and interdependence, like one reporter who suggested he and his colleagues begin using the tag NR, neutral retweet, to preface the retweets on Twitter that were posting but not endorsing, I can't help but think of the subprime mortgage crisis. I think about one bank that hands off subprime loans to another, which in turn packages them and hands them to another still. Why are you retweeting things you don't believe in? I think about the rating agencies whose job was to monitor the subprime transactions, but were simply too busy, too overwhelmed, and too conflicted to bother doing it. I think of falling dominoes. I wonder why we would do that to ourselves again, multiplied many times over in digital. Of course, replication is expensive, but it is a known cost, one that should be paid up front by the people who intend to profit from the news. It is a protection and a deterrent all at once. The unknown cost comes from failure of banks or of trust or of sources, and it is borne by everyone, not just the business themselves. When Jarvis and others breathlessly advocate for new concepts they do not understand, it is both comical and dangerous. The web gurus try to tell us that this distributed crowdsourced version of fact checking and research is more accurate because it involves more people. But I side with Descartes and have more faith in a scientific approach in which every man is responsible for his own work, in which everyone is questioning the work of everyone else, and this motivates them to be extra careful and honest. The old media system was a long way from perfect, but their costly business model at least tried to find independent confirmation where possible. It advocated editorial independence instead of risky interdependence. It was expensive, sure, and definitely unsexy, but it was a step above the pseudoscience of the link economy. It was certainly better than what we have online, where blogs do nothing but report what some other blog is reporting, where blogs pass along unverified information using the excuse, but I linked to where I stole it from. To simply know where something came from, or just the fact that it came from somewhere else, does not alleviate the problems of the delegation of trust. In fact, this is the insidious part of the link economy. It creates the appearance of a solution without solving anything. Some other blog talked to a source, don't believe them, here's the link, so now they have to. Now they don't have to. That isn't enough for me. We deserve better. Okay, that is the end of that second chapter for the night. That puts us on to chapter 17 next time, Cyber Warfare. We'll do chapters 17 and 18 next time. And I think there's 19, 20. I'm not sure how many. 21. There's 21 chapters and a conclusion. So, yeah, and we're on 17. So we'll do 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and conclusion. So we're done with this book in 3 readings. And I have already been thinking about the next reading. I've been putting it off, but somebody asked me specifically, another streamer asked me to read some philosophy. So I decided that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read Plato for the next thing. So I haven't decided exactly what, or if I'm just going to try to read it all. I don't know. I'll just have to look and see. Or I will go to that person and ask his recommendation. Is probably what I'll do. So anyway, let's see who's around. Mr. Blitzer, Vesper Vidya Retro. Actually, he's the one that recommended I read Plato next. We've been to Vesper a couple of times recently. Let's go to Mr. Blitzer. He's playing Dying Light 2. So bear with me a couple of minutes. I'll take us on over there, and I will see you there.
Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of
Maybe he just ended.
mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. I'm assembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and given up. So it's in my
Yep, we just missed him, so we'll go over to Vesper instead.
so tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself.
Vesper.
I feel the world collapsing in my ear.
changing my mind again. Here we go.
More sophisticated into